There's a knock you don't forget, not the polite kind that waits its turn. No, this one pounded like a repo man who just spotted your F-150 in the driveway. I was elbow-deep in gun oil, cleaning my grandfather's old Remington, the same one he took on his final deer hunt, the one he left me with a handwritten note that said, "Take care of this like you take care of your word." That Tuesday afternoon was supposed to be quiet, peaceful, but that knock came like a threat wrapped in cheap confidence. I looked up from the workbench and thought, well, here we go. And when I peeked through the blinds, there she was, standing on my porch like a sitcom villain in a blazer 2 shades too pink and 5 sizes too tight, waving a clipboard like she'd just subpoenaed my soul. If you've ever wondered what happens when you mix a fake authority figure with someone who spent over a decade training elite soldiers, well, keep watching, because things got wild and neighborly disputes. Let's just say, this wasn't about barking dogs or untrimmed hedges. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from, whether it's a front porch in Texas or a condo with one too many bylaws taped to the fridge. If you're into real feeling stories with more twists than a garden hose under HOA surveillance, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's tale? Let's just say, if you thought today was wild, what's coming next might just make you change your locks. You won't want to miss it. Let me back up for context. I'm Caleb Mercer, retired Army Special Ops, now a history teacher trying to replace explosions with essays. I moved to Heritage Hills for some quiet, for healing, for space. I figured the worst thing I'd deal with was overcooked casserole at the HOA potluck, but nobody told me the neighborhood came with its own self-appointed law enforcement, Danielle Sloan, compliance agents for something called Neighborhood Integrity Partners. Her business card might as well have said fraud enthusiast. The woman had all the authority of a cardboard badge from a cereal box. And yet, there she stood, issuing demands like I'd missed a court date. Behind her, looming like a bouncer who got lost on the way to a casino, was Vince Torres. Sunglasses, tactical boots, and the overall demeanor of someone who failed a polygraph just by walking into the room. Danielle lifted the clipboard like it had magical powers. "We've received several complaints about improper firearm storage on your property," she announced, in a voice that sounded like she'd practiced it in front of a cracked mirror. I took one look at her documents and nearly laughed. The seal was crooked, the logo looked like it had been designed by a bored 8th grader, and the paper itself had the glossy sheen of something printed at a hotel business center 5 minutes before check-in. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my tone smooth, "before anyone inspects anything, I'll need to see proper ID and a warrant. You know, like they taught us in Civics 101. Her face went red. Not the kind of red that comes from authority being challenged, but the kind that comes from someone who realizes they've underestimated their target. Vince tensed behind her, shifting like he was about to try something physical. But here's the thing about men like Vince. They bluff. And I've stared down too many real threats to flinch at a man whose name tag looked like it came with Velcro. I closed the door slowly, calmly, like I was sealing a vault. Then I walked straight to the kitchen window and watched. Danielle was already flailing her arms in Vince's direction like he'd forgotten the script. They paced the sidewalk in circles before climbing into what I can only describe as a vehicle held together by prayer and duct tape. It was a sun-bleached sedan with mismatched panels and a "My other car is a lawsuit" bumper sticker. I didn't need a lie detector, I didn't need background checks, I just needed common sense and a good neighbor. So I picked up the phone and called Nora Bishop, my 73-year-old neighbor with a sharper legal mind than most law schools. Nora was the kind of woman who retired from the county courthouse but never stopped quoting ordinances like scripture. When I asked if we had HOA, I sat down, grabbed the same notebook I once used for recon in Kandahar, and started mapping things out. This wasn't a nosy neighbor. This was someone playing dress-up with the law, someone betting on fear over fact. Danielle wasn't enforcing anything, she was casing. And in a world already full of fake IDs and louder liars, she was just another imposter looking to exploit the rules she barely understood. But what she didn't realize was this: I don't respond well to clipboard cowboys. I spent a career sorting real threats from manufactured ones, so if Danielle Sloan wanted a compliance check, she was going to get one. just not the kind she expected. The second they left my driveway, I did what any former special ops soldier turned history teacher would do. I grabbed a sandwich, opened my laptop, and went full digital bloodhound. It didn't take long. You'd think a professional scammer would at least clean up her online trail, but Danielle Sloan left more breadcrumbs than a distracted pigeon. Her company, Neighborhood Integrity Partners, was registered under something called Home Ornaments Advisory LLC. Yes, ornaments, as in Christmas decorations. That's like finding out your home inspector also runs a fortune cookie startup. That clipboard she waved like a badge? About as official as a dollar store diploma. But what made me sit up straighter was the ATF mention. Turns out she'd filed 3 separate federal complaints in the last 6 months, all against gun owners, all dismissed. I wasn't just a target, I was the next name on a hit list of legal citizens she was trying to shake down. And that meant I had one thing left to do: flip the script before she flipped mine. Stick with me. This rabbit hole's just getting warmed up. Now Vince, her muscle without a cause, his resume made even less sense than hers. I found records of him being fired from 3 different security jobs, always for excessive response, or as civilians call it, losing your temper and swinging fists like you're paid by the punch. He wasn't licensed, bonded, or even passable at faking authority. What he did have, though, was a rap sheet, including an assault charge still hanging over him like a forgotten parking ticket with hand. And the kicker? The address they listed as their corporate HQ on their inspection form was a burned-down smoothie shop 2 towns over. I couldn't make this up if I tried. These weren't scammers with a plan. They were scammers with a printer and delusions of competence. But that's what made them dangerous. A stupid crook is unpredictable, and a desperate one is explosive. And I had a hunch these 2 were both. That's why I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I mapped everything, because the best defense is making the enemy think they've got you right where they want you. That's when I found the camera. I was reorganizing my garage the next morning, pretending to go about my business like nothing happened, when I noticed it. Just a tiny glint of plastic behind my air filter unit, no bigger than a quarter, but my gut dropped like I'd stepped on a landmine. It was a wireless minicam, low-end, battery-powered, the kind you'd use if you wanted to spy without investing in quality. Still, it had a perfect angle on the workbench where I cleaned my guns. Suddenly, the whole inspection shtick made more sense. Danielle wasn't just fishing for compliance fines, she was cataloging valuables. Trying to ID what to take and when to take it. That's not neighborhood enforcement, that's casing for a burglary. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. You don't spend 12 years in black ops without learning to spot surveillance gear, especially the kind purchased from the buy to get probation section of the internet. I didn't touch it, I left it running, because now the game had changed. So I did what soldiers do when the enemy sets a trap: you flip it and bait the trigger. I picked up my phone, called the number on Danielle's fake business card, and left a message with just the right mix of regret and obedience. "Hi, this is Caleb Mercer. About yesterday? I've been thinking. I'd like to be compliant with all HOA regulations. Could you come back Saturday? I'd feel better getting everything resolved." I even threw in a little nervousness at the end, just to sell the act. You ever seen a scammer when they think the mark's ready to pay? It's like watching a raccoon spot an unlocked trash can. Suddenly they forget the plan and start rushing. That was my goal: rush them, get them sloppy, get them confident, because confidence makes criminals careless, and careless makes evidence. I had a hunch they'd show up again, only this time I'd be ready with more than questions. I'd have eyes, ears, and Nora Bishop with her legal pad of doom waiting in the wings. But don't worry, we're not quite at the climax yet. That night, I set up my own surveillance rig. 3 discrete cameras, all motion-stricken and aimed to cover my driveway, front door, and garage entrance. I installed backup audio recorders and created a secure folder labeled, "If I disappear, open this." Call me dramatic, but I've read enough military after-action reports to know that bad things happen when you underestimate low-level threats. Danielle and Vince weren't just running a local scam, They were running a pattern built on fear, bluster, and the assumption that no one would question a piece of paper taped to a clipboard. But I wasn't most people. I had training, time, and now a very personal reason to burn this operation down. I wasn't just protecting my property, I was protecting my neighbors too. As if these people were watching me, they were watching others. And if you let bullies run unchecked in one driveway, they'll take the whole street. Saturday was coming, and this time I'd be the one holding the clipboard, except mine would say Evidence Exhibit A. And trust me, what happened next, it only gets juicier. So, the stage was set, the trap was live, and the clipboard crew had no idea they were walking straight into it. But trust me, what happened on Saturday morning made the fake inspection look like a dress rehearsal. If you're loving the ride so far, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next. Because when they showed up again, they brought backup, and things got real fast. Saturday didn't just arrive, it made an entrance. Right at 10:00 a.m. sharp, like clockwork with delusions of grandeur, a beat-up beige sedan wheezed into my driveway. Out came Danielle Sloan, dressed like a department store mannequin trying to cosplay authority. Navy blazer, synthetic badge, and what I swear was a utility belt from a discontinued Halloween aisle. Behind her strutted Vince, still hiding behind mirrored sunglasses as if they shielded him from making bad decisions. But the real surprise? 2 new recruits, Mike and Sarah, fresh-faced, nervous, and dressed in matching polos like they'd just walked off an insurance seminar. That's when I knew this wasn't just a visit. It was a performance, and I had front-row seats and every camera rolling. I opened the door with the kind of smile you reserve for telemarketers and surprise visits from in-laws. "Morning," I said, stepping aside. "Y'all here to inspect my doormat or just steal my Tupperware?" Danielle didn't laugh. She had the forced smile of someone trying to hold in a power trip. "We're here to conduct your compliance inspection," she announced. "Firearms, ammunition, valuable assets. We've also received reports of unlicensed items stored on the premises." She waved her clipboard like it came from the Vatican. I motioned them inside, calmly guiding them along the exact route I'd planned the night before. Every step they took was tracked. Motion sensors, wide-angle cams, discreet mics. While they thought they were building a case, I was collecting evidence. I call that poetic symmetry. They reached the living room, and that's when Vince decided to do his big act. He stepped forward like an understudy for intimidation, hand hovering near his belt like it held something besides bad intentions. "That won't be necessary," he grunted when I lifted my phone. "This is a classified operation. No recording allowed." I cocked my head. "See, that's the thing, Vince. Texas is a one-party consent state, and I'm the party, plus this is my house, so if y'all don't mind, we'll be rolling." Danielle stiffened, flipped another page like she was trying to skip ahead in a choose-your-own-crime adventure, and said, "Very well, let's proceed." Mike and Sarah exchanged glances. Sarah was already starting to look like she regretted whatever Craigslist post brought her here. Then came the fee. Danielle cleared her throat, put on her serious voice, and said, "To process the inspection, there's a required HOA compliance fee of $8,000, 0 cents. Due today, cash, check, or wire transfer accepted." I blinked. "I'm sorry, did you say 8,000? She nodded. "Covers documentation, evaluation, and legal processing." Vince folded his arms and took a step closer. That's when I almost broke character, because charging $8,000 for fake paperwork is bold, but doing it with 2 confused interns and a garage full of cameras, that's a comedy special waiting to happen. I opened my mouth to respond, but I didn't have to, because right on cue, like divine timing with orthopedic shoes, came the voice of Nora Bishop from the front door. "Caleb, honey, I brought those real HOA documents you asked for," she called out sweetly, stepping in like a woman who knew exactly how to ruin someone's day. With style. Danielle froze. Vince turned. Mike and Sarah looked like they'd just been served a lawsuit and a sight of dread. Nora walked in holding a manila folder that looked heavier than Danielle's entire operation. "Oh my," she said, surveying the room. "Is this an inspection or a middle school reenactment of Law and Order?" Danielle's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, this is a restricted enforcement activity. You'll need to leave immediately." Nora smiled like a retired librarian about to cite the U.S. Constitution. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "I worked at the county courthouse for 32 years. I know what a real inspection looks like. And this ain't it." Danielle stammered. Vince adjusted his glasses like they might suddenly give him credibility. Nora, undeterred, flipped open the folder. According to the official bylaws of Heritage Hills, all inspections must be submitted in writing, 72 hours in advance, and carried out by bonded, licensed professionals. She looked up, dagger sharp. "Are you licensed? Bonded? Notarized?" Danielle said nothing. Mike and Sarah visibly stepped away. The curtain was falling, and they didn't want to be on stage anymore. Nora wasn't done. "This paper," she continued, waving Danielle's fake form, "looks like it was printed on a gas station receipt and signed by a cartoon character." I could have applauded, but I didn't want to ruin the moment. Then Vince, bless his misguided soul, tried to salvage the wreck. "We got backup coming," he said gruffly. "And when they get here, you're going to be sorry you messed with HOA enforcement." Now, here's the thing about threats. You need timing, tone, and truth. Vince had none. He sounded like a raccoon threatening to sue animal control. I didn't flinch. I just glanced toward the camera. Rolling, perfect audio. Nora scribbled notes like a courtroom stenographer on espresso. "Is that right?" I said casually. "Back up. Wonderful. I'm sure they'll enjoy reviewing this footage and explaining why an unregistered company is conducting surprise inspections under a fake name." Vince's eyes darted to the door again. Danielle's mouth opened, but no words came out. Mike and Sarah? Frozen in place. No longer participants, now witnesses. And then, the final nail. Nora pulled out the document she'd been saving like a legal ace. "This," she said, "is the actual HOA charter for this neighborhood. The real one, not the Comic Sans disaster you brought in here." She handed it to me, then turned to Danielle with a grandmotherly smile that somehow felt like a court summons. "You've got about 5 minutes before this turns into something official. I suggest you think carefully about your next move." Danielle blinked, as if trying to decide whether to double down or disappear. Vince had gone silent. Mike and Sarah edged toward the door. Me? I stood there, smiling calmly, knowing full well this performance was about to close with flashing lights and criminal charges. But you'll want to stick around for that part. It's when things really take a turn. The sirens hit right on Vince's final threat. Like divine comedic timing with flashing lights, not the kind of sirens that make you nervous, but the kind that make you straighten up and think, finally. Sheriff Brooks pulled into my driveway with a calm swagger, his cruiser gliding to a stop like it had nothing to prove and everything to enforce. He stepped out slowly, the way only a man with actual authority does. Brooks and I go back. We trained together during a joint counter-intel course at Fort Rucker. He once beat me in a forgery detection exercise by spotting a fake military pass using nothing but a coffee stain. And now here he was, eyes squinting against the morning sun, scanning a scene that looked like a yard sale run by delusion. Danielle rushed forward like she'd just found her lifeline. "Officer, thank goodness. We're conducting an HOA compliance inspection. This man has refused to cooperate, and that woman," she pointed at Nora like she'd just committed a federal bake sale violation, "has obstructed our official duties." Brooks looked her over like she'd just asked to borrow his badge for karaoke. "Compliance inspection," he said flatly. "And who authorized you to conduct that?" Danielle flipped her clipboard to a page filled with enough bullet points to make it look important. Brooks wasn't buying it. "You work with the county?" he asked. "Because I've never seen that company name on a single municipal authorization list." Nora stepped up beside him and said, "That's because they're not on one." She held up her folder. "I've got the real HOA documents. And I've got questions." Vince, sensing the shift, paced a little too close to the coffee table and made the mistake of filling the silence. Look, we didn't come here to hurt anybody, he said, hands slightly raised. She just said we had to follow the script to make it look real. The room went silent. You could practically hear the sound of Danielle's career hopes deflating. What script? Brooks asked, low and controlled. Vince's eyes widened like he just remembered there were cameras everywhere. The one she gave us, he snapped, panic bubbling up. She said it'd only work if we stuck to the lines and acted confident. Danielle's face morphed from smug to steaming. Shut your mouth, Vince, she barked. You have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, he knows exactly what he's talking about, I said calmly. And so does every camera in this house. Nora, never one to waste a moment, flipped to a clean page in her notebook and began writing, like she was transcribing the downfall of a petty tyrant in real time. Brooks stepped between them. Miss Sloane, he said, I'm going to advise you to remain seated and silent. Backup's already en route. And almost as if cued by a director, the unmistakable hum of a government SUV rolled up to the curb. Jet black, windows tinted darker than Danielle's chances at redemption. Two agents stepped out, one older and measured, the other younger, sharper, and scanning the scene like he'd walked into a training manual come to life. That's when the younger agent saw me. Mercer? He asked, stepping forward. You taught counter-fraud detection at Benning, right? That's me, I said, shaking his hand. You're Cole, right? Document Rotation Course 2012. He smiled. Still the best class I ever sat through. Danielle, sensing that things were slipping out of her hands faster than her forged paperwork, tried to pivot. Agents, thank God you're here, she said, flipping to another stack of papers. This man is harboring illegal firearms and impersonating HOA compliance standards. I've filed multiple reports with your office. The older agent took her papers and stared at them like they were written in crayon. Is this Comic Sans? He asked. Ma'am, you submitted an official court order using Comic Sans font? And that's not even the worst part, Cole added. There's a typo in the seal, and the judge listed doesn't exist. We checked when the call came in. There's no Judge Thompson in this county or the next one over. Danielle blinked like someone had unplugged her reality. It's a template, she stammered. They told me it was standard. They, Brooks asked. Who's they? Nora leaned in, whispering, I bet they also sell timeshares in Siberia. Cole started reviewing the footage from my system. Well, Mr. Mercer, you've outdone yourself. Multiple angles, audio clarity, timestamps. This is better than most of our sting operations. I shrugged. Old habits. Danielle began pacing, muttering about legal protections and civil rights. You're violating my constitutional protections, she shouted at no one in particular. Nora responded dryly. You impersonated law enforcement, committed document fraud, and tried to extort a veteran. The Constitution is not your flotation device, dear. Vince, meanwhile, had deflated into silence, clearly realizing his clipboard dreams were over. Mike and Sarah, the two confused bystanders, had been quietly pulled aside and were giving statements, faces pale and eyes wide. They looked like college interns who'd accidentally signed up for a live-action lawsuit. Cole turned back toward Danielle, who was now clinging to her badge like it held magical immunity. Miss Sloane, he said. You're being placed under federal investigation for impersonating law enforcement, falsifying legal documents, and filing fraudulent reports with a federal agency. Anything you say, I want a lawyer, she shouted. Right now. Halston nodded. You'll need a good one, because this isn't just a misunderstanding. This is a textbook felony spree. He pulled out handcuffs and approached her calmly, professionally, like he'd done this 100 times. Danielle tried one last Hail Mary. I was doing a public service. People like him shouldn't own— Nope, Halston interrupted. That's enough. Let's not dig the hole any deeper. As the cuffs clicked, Vince slumped onto the couch like someone had unplugged his last excuse. Cole turned to me and said, We've actually been tracking complaints like this. 3 counties, same pattern. She reports gun owners, creates fake inspections, then catalogs valuables for future theft. You're not her first mark, but you might be her last. Nora clapped once, softly. Well, look at that. We just hosted a live federal takedown in your living room. Should I put on a pot of coffee? Mike and Sarah asked if they were in trouble. Cole assured them they weren't, as long as they cooperated. You're victims too, he said, but you're going to want to find a new job, preferably one where the dress code doesn't include felony charges. As they led Danielle out, she turned back one last time. Gone was the clipboard queen with power in her posture. What remained was a woman unmasked, fraud exposed, lies unraveling like a discount sweater. Her last expression wasn't rage. It was recognition. She knew it was over. Knew she'd lost to a man with a camera, a calm tone, and a neighbor named Nora who carried a folder like a gavel. Vince followed behind her, silent now, all his previous bluster packed away like Halloween decorations in November. And me? I stood there watching it all thinking, there's a certain kind of justice that doesn't wear a uniform or raise its voice. It just shows up with receipts, cameras, and one very thick notebook. Agent Halston stood in my living room flipping through Danielle's so-called documents like a disappointed professor grading a freshman essay, typed entirely in wingdings. He stopped on the page labeled Court Order and held it up with the tips of 2 fingers like it had a contagious rash. "Let me guess," he said. "Downloaded from a template site, edited in Microsoft Word and printed after 3 glasses of boxed wine?" Cole stepped closer to take a look and sighed. "Comic Sans," he muttered. "I've seen birthday invitations with more legal credibility." Halston pointed at the signature. "No title, no clerk's stamp, and signed by a judge who doesn't exist. This isn't a court order. This is a sad resume for a failed con artist." Danielle, now seated in cuffs and losing color by the second, tried to claw her way back to authority using only tone and volume. "That order is valid under municipal inspection protocol," she barked, voice trembling under the weight of collapsing fiction. Halston didn't even look up. "There is no such thing. You filed it under a court that isn't real, in a county that doesn't exist, with a seal that looks suspiciously like it was lifted from a high school student council election." He dropped the clipboard on my coffee table with a thud. "Mr. Mercer," he continued, "can you confirm the recordings match the events described?" 3 angles, I said. "Full audio, time-stamped. I can forward the files to your office." Cole nodded. "Perfect. The edit job on this one's going to be easy." That's when Vince, who'd been slouched in silence and shame, sat up like someone had just mentioned reduced sentencing. "Look," he said quickly. "I didn't know how deep it went. She told me it was just HOA stuff, helping neighborhoods clean up." He looked around as if waiting for someone to believe him. "But then she started asking for names. Veterans, mostly. Said they were the best targets because they wouldn't make noise. That they'd have collections worth something." That word targets landed like a dropped hammer. Halston's eyebrows twitched. Cole went still. Nora's jaw tightened. "Me?" I felt the room tilt. It was no longer about one house. It was a pattern. And I wasn't the first. "You're saying this was a multi-demarcation scheme?" Cole asked. Vince nodded. "She kept a file, paper and digital. We've got a storage unit. Files on 20 families, maybe more. She kept everything. Names, addresses, what kind of guns they had, who lived alone." Cole turned to Halston. "We'll need a warrant." Halston was already pulling one from a pre-signed stack. "This just went federal in 3 counties. Danielle looked like she'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Her eyes darted between me, Cole, and the door like she was calculating the odds of outrunning justice in handcuffs. Desperate people don't admit guilt. They escalate. And that's exactly what she did. "I already sent a file to the ATF," she said, raising her voice like it gave her leverage. "I reported him. They're going to investigate. When they find what I found—" "They'll charge you," Halston interrupted, "with filing false reports." "Again?" He laid out a slim blue folder on the table and opened it like he was dealing tarot. "Let's see, 4 ATF complaints in the last 6 months, all involving gun owners. All fake, all dismissed. Each time your name showed up in the call logs. We verified this morning." Danielle blinked, then blinked again. You could almost see her brain flipping through the Rolodex of excuses. She came up empty. Cole looked at me. She's been targeting veterans? I nodded. Neighbors told me she ran the same play in Pine Valley. Nora, caught wind of it a few weeks ago. I thought she was bluffing, until I found the camera in my garage. Halston nodded grimly. It fits. Veterans are trained private and less likely to report. She fakes an HOA inspection, pretends to document compliance issues, then either demands money or catalogs valuables for later theft. Nora stepped forward. That's not just fraud, that's predatory profiling. Her voice was low, but it cut like piano wire. And she used the law as her costume. Danielle tried one last bluff. You have no proof that I stole anything? Halston raised a hand. Maybe not yet, but intent to defraud is a federal charge all on its own. And once we open that storage unit, if we find one piece of evidence tying this to multiple addresses, you're looking at conspiracy. That's 10 years minimum. Per count? Danielle leaned back and stared at the ceiling like it might have a lifeline carved into it. Vince slumped farther down, arms crossed like a kid who got caught cheating on a spelling test. Cole turned toward him. You willing to testify? Vince nodded. I'll show you everything. I just want out. The irony wasn't lost on me. She built her house of lies with clipboards, counterfeit seals, and scared silence. And in the end, it all crumbled because one loudmouth forgot the script. A single, unscripted line and the whole production collapsed. Her plan fell apart like a folding chair at a family BBQ. Too many lies, not enough support. Nora was writing furiously, probably crafting the neighborhood newsletter's crime blotter in real time. This is going to make the HOA meeting very interesting, she muttered. And that's when it really hit me. This was never personal. She didn't know me. Didn't care about my name, my service, or my teaching job. I was just another pin on her fake map, another porch with blinds pulled halfway and a mailbox worth checking. She didn't target me because of anything I did. She targeted me because I didn't fit the profile of someone who'd fight back. But what she didn't know, what scammers never seem to learn, is that the quiet ones, they don't just watch, they record, they wait, they prepare, and when the time's right, they respond, not with panic, with precision. Gold tapped the clipboard one more time. You know, he said, I train new agents with forgery examples. This might be our new what not to do exhibit. Halston chuckled. Exhibit A, court order in Comic Sans. Exhibit B, badge printed from a cereal box. Exhibit C, a business license registered under Home Ornaments Advisory. Nora snorted. What? No legal arm of Bed Bath & Beyond? The room chuckled, except for Danielle, who was now staring at her shoes like they owed her an apology. The agent started packing up evidence. Cole handed me a small receipt pad. We'll log everything, but you might want to change your locks and get a new garage camera, just in case. I nodded. Already done. As they processed Vince's statement and prepped to head to the storage unit, Nora gave me a small smile. This is going in the scrapbook, she said. Right next to the time we caught that guy pretending to be a pool inspector so he could spy on hot tubs. I raised an eyebrow. That actually happened? She winked. Honey, this neighborhood's a circus. You just helped close the freak show. And with that, they loaded Danielle and Vince into the waiting cars, one trying to rewrite her fate with last-minute gaslighting, the other finally realizing he was a footnote in someone else's con. Me, I stood on the porch with Nora, watching the last of the clipboard kingdom roll away. And deep down, I knew we weren't done yet. Not until that storage unit opened. And not until the last lie was documented, filed, and buried under its own stupidity. 3 months later, I was back in my garage cleaning the same Remington my grandfather passed down, a 1940S model he swore never jammed unless you did something stupid. Funny how it became my ritual again, but this time, it wasn't about clearing my head. It was about breathing easy. Danielle Sloan had been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to every family she'd targeted. Over $180,000, 0 cents in damages and fines. Vince Torres got 18 months, and a permanent restraining order that barred him from coming within 500 feet of anything with an address or a conscience. Their entire scam folded so hard and fast, even their storage units surrendered, full of notes, photos, and plans to hit 5 more counties like a badly organized door-to-door disaster tour. And let me tell you, nobody enjoyed the Justice Parade more than Nora Bishop. Nora didn't just become a neighborhood legend, she became an institution. Kids started calling her Mrs. Gavel, and I'm pretty sure she got offered a spot on the HOA board 5 separate times. She turned them all down, said she liked being independent. Besides, she told me, I've got more power with a pen and a spiral notebook than they do with a whole committee. People brought her cookies like offerings to a local oracle. One guy even offered to install a plaque in her yard. She declined that, too. Said it would interfere with her bird bath aesthetic. I don't know what that means, but when Nora talks, I listen. About a week after the sentencing, the Heritage Hills HOA came to me with an offer. They wanted me to serve as community security consultant, basically the unofficial point person for identifying, documenting, and helping prevent scams and violations. It didn't pay much, but I wasn't in it for the money. What sealed the deal was the moment I signed the contract using my grandfather's World War II fountain pen, the same pen he used to write letters home from France. The ink still ran smooth, like it had been waiting, and as I signed, I realized I wasn't just putting my name on a paper. I was reclaiming peace. Not just mine, but the community's, too. From there, things took on a rhythm I hadn't expected. I started hosting monthly workshops at the local rec center. Scam-proofing your property, we called it. Subtitle, What to Do When HOA Stands for Highly Overconfident A-Holes. People showed up, not just retirees or veterans, but younger families, single moms, small business owners. We covered it all, how to verify IDs, spot fake business names, recognize real legal documents versus ones that smell like Comic Sans and desperate. But we also talked about gut instinct. The moment your spine stiffens and you just know something's off. That's a survival skill, not paranoia. And if my story could help folks trust their instincts before someone planted a camera in their garage, then good. That meant the experience had weight beyond my own driveway. There's something you don't hear often about military service. It doesn't end, it evolves. You can hang up the uniform, but the watchfulness? That never fades. You go from defending perimeters to defending sidewalks, from watching enemy movement to watching for suspicious utility vans parked just a little too long near the cul-de-sac. Service becomes quieter, but no less vital. And in a world full of fake authority, real integrity stands out like high beams on a dark road. That's what this whole thing reminded me of. You don't need rank to protect something. You need awareness. And maybe a decent surveillance system. And a neighbor with a righteous notebook. Sometimes people ask me if I'm mad it happened, if I wish I could rewind it. And honestly, no, I don't. Because that whole mess reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten, that peace isn't just the absence of trouble. It's the presence of readiness. It's the ability to hold your ground, not with rage, but with calm legal efficiency. And sometimes with a little humor, because at the end of the day, Danielle Sloan is now in federal prison, and her Comic Sans court order is probably hanging on a break room fridge as a cautionary tale to junior agents. That's the real punchline here. She tried to bully her way into my home, weaponize fake documents, and gaslight a community of veterans and retirees. And in return, she's going to serve time in a facility where her clipboard routine won't even get her cafeteria privileges. She's got bigger problems now. And Comic Sans? Yeah, probably banned where she's going. And Vince? Well, last I heard he was picking up trash on the highway as part of his community service. Maybe he'll finally learn the difference between intimidation and responsibility. Or maybe not. Either way, he won't be my problem again. The restraining order makes sure of that. And if he ever did try to come back, let's just say Heritage Hills is a little better prepared now. We've got a new kind of watchfulness, a silent network of residents who now know the signs, know their rights, and know that questioning authority isn't defiance, it's diligence. And me, I'm still cleaning that Remington every Saturday morning, not because I expect trouble, but because I know how to handle it if it knocks again. And this time, if it does, it better come with proper credentials, state certification, and 0 fonts from elementary school publishing software. I've seen enough to know one truth. Bad actors will always show up with new tricks. But if you're grounded, if your people have each other's backs, those tricks don't work. Because fraud is like mold. It thrives in silence and shadow, but once the light hits it, it shrivels. That's what we did here. We flipped the lights on. And now, that street is clean. My Remington's clean. The air's a little lighter. That's legacy, not just the one I inherited from my grandfather, but the one I get to pass on now. So if you're still watching, thanks. You made it through the whole story. A story that started with a knock and ended with a contract, a courtroom, and one very confused scammer in federal custody. And if you've ever had a neighbor like Danielle, or even a clipboard warrior with a god complex, drop a comment below. I'll be reading every one of them with a cup of black coffee and a clean rifle. Because this story may be done, but you and me, we've still got plenty more mayhem to uncover. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Tomorrow's story? Let's just say it involves a lawn flamingo, a golf cart, and the worst HOA president to ever fake a cease and desist order. You're going to want to see how that one ends. You ever dealt with someone like Danielle, the kind who hides behind rules they made up that morning, acting like a clipboard gives them a crown? Drop your story in the comments. I read every one of them, black coffee in hand, shaking my head like I've seen this movie before. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time, because tomorrow's story, let's just say it involves a neighborhood election, a fake restraining order, and a garden gnome named Larry. And you won't believe how it ends.